My name is Karen Mitchell, and for as long as I can remember, family has been the center of my life. I was raised in a small town in Ohio, where Sundays were always spent with cousins, uncles, and grandparents gathered around long tables, filled with food. As the years passed, and everyone went their separate ways, it became harder to keep that closeness alive. But I tried my best. I was especially close to my younger sister, Rebecca, and her only son, my nephew, Ethan. From the moment he was born, I felt a bond with him that went beyond the normal aunt-nephew relationship. Maybe it was because I never had children of my own, or maybe it was simply the way he looked at me, with those wide, trusting eyes. Like I was someone who could move mountains for him. Ethan had always been a dreamer. Even as a little boy, he'd sit by the window during thunderstorms and imagine worlds where knights fought dragons. Or he'd draw pictures of rocket ships and swear he'd go to space one day. Life hadn't always been easy for him, though. His father left when he was very young, and Rebecca had to raise him mostly on her own. I stepped in whenever I could, babysitting, taking him to school, or showing up at soccer games to cheer the loudest from the bleachers. Over time, Ethan began to confide in me about things he didn't always share with his mom. His hopes, his fears, and the little wishes he carried deep in his heart. One summer evening, when he was about 12 years old, Ethan and I sat outside on my porch. The cicadas buzzed in the distance, and the smell of freshly cut grass hung in the air. He leaned against me with a thoughtful look in his eyes. "And Karen," he said quietly, "if you could grant me one wish, just one, would you do it?" The question caught me off guard. I laughed lightly and brushed his hair back from his forehead. "Well, that depends. What's this wish of yours?" He hesitated as though afraid I might dismiss it, but then he said, "I want to see the ocean. I've seen pictures and movies, but I've never been there. I want to know what it feels like to stand on the sand and hear the waves. Mom says we can't afford a trip right now, but if I had one wish, that would be it." My heart squeezed inside my chest. To me, a trip to the ocean was something simple, but to Ethan, it was a dream, a moment of magic he'd been holding on to. I looked at him, and without thinking twice, I said, "Then we'll make it happen. I promise." That night, I started planning. Money was tight for Rebecca, but I had been saving a little for a rainy day. I decided that day had come. I researched coastal towns within driving distance, looking for a place that wasn't too crowded, but still offered that breathtaking view of the ocean Ethan longed for. Eventually, I found a small beach town in North Carolina. It was affordable, family-friendly, and seemed like the perfect escape. When I told Rebecca about my plan, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Karen, you don't have to do this. It's a lot, and you've already done so much for us." I squeezed her hand. "He's my nephew, Becky, and sometimes kids need more than just food and clothes. They need memories, something to hold on to when life gets tough. Let me do this for him." She nodded, and within a couple of weeks, Ethan and I were loading up the car with snacks, beach towels, and enough excitement to power the whole trip. I'll never forget the look on his face as we pulled onto the highway, the windows down, the radio blasting his favorite songs. For once, his laughter wasn't weighed down by anything. The drive was long, but we filled it with silly games, stories, and dreams. Ethan asked 1,000 questions about the ocean, what the water would feel like, whether seashells were easy to find, and if crabs really scuttled sideways, the way cartoons showed them. I answered everything I could, but deep down, I was just as excited to watch him discover it all for the first time. When we finally arrived, it was late afternoon. The sun hung low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The salty air rushed into the car the moment I opened the door. Ethan froze on the boardwalk, his eyes wide as the roar of the waves filled his ears. He didn't move at first. He just stood there, like he couldn't believe something so big and endless was real. Then, without warning, he bolted forward, kicking off his shoes, and running straight for the sand. I followed, laughing as he let out a cry of pure joy. His small feet sank into the wet sand, and he waded into the foamy water, squealing when the waves splashed his legs. I stood there watching him, my chest tight with emotion. In that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. It wasn't just a trip. It was a memory he would keep forever. That night, we sat by the shore under a blanket of stars. Ethan leaned against me, exhausted from all the excitement, and whispered, "Thank you, Aunt Karen. You made my wish come true." I kissed the top of his head. "Always, Ethan. Whenever you have a wish, I'll do whatever I can to say yes." What I didn't know then was that this promise would carry us through much more than just a summer trip. That wish was only the beginning of a journey that would change both of our lives in ways I never expected.